fantastic fishing show. Today we're going to talk about uptide fishing and downtide fishing and how it can really benefit you when you're out fishing. So I've drawn this little boat here. If you can imagine, we've got the anchor out over here like this, so the tide's washing the boat this way. Now we can cast the line off the back, and that would be called downtide fishing because we're fishing down a tide. So if you can imagine, we've got a rod and we're coming down the rig. Generally, the best kind of rigs I find personally work for me are rigs with the hook line after the weight, because if you've got the hook, say like a flapper here, the tide kind of washes it sort of quite near the weight, and sometimes it gets tangled up. So I tend to have my hook line after the weight. So if you can imagine, this is the weight, and then I've got a hook coming after with my bait. I've got a rig tied up here. So this is like a running ledger kind of style weights. I have a weight that can move up and down my main line, and then straight off the end of it I have my trace going down to a hook. And the way that would sit in the water is, and there's my weight on my little running thing. And this is my main line with a swivel to stop it. And I normally put like a bead or something here to protect my knot, and then my line coming up to a rod. On the end of this swivel here, I'll have my hook length with my bait. Now the idea of this is that when the fish picks up the bait, it gives you a bit of time to pick up the rod. You don't have to pick up straight away because it will lift and pull the line through, which will compound the rod, and then it will bob the weight and you'll see the bite on your rod. Now you can use this kind of rig uptide. It's fine to use uptide. This is my preferred method for downtide because this hook will wash away from a main line and keep it away so it doesn't tangle. Now for uptide, let's rub this out 1 second. Now when you uptide fish, it's really hard to keep your weight down, and what you need to do, if you can imagine, we cast, this is our rod, and if we just cast our weight out here with our hooks like this, the power of the tide is just going to pull on this line, and it's just going to basically drag this weight, and you end up downtide fishing. And then what happens is, if you've got a rig that isn't tied very well for downtide fishing, it all just tangles up and it becomes a mess. Or if there's a lot of you on the boat, you end up with loads of rods at the back, and you don't want that. So what we do to make it grip is, first of all, we use these. This is called gripper leads or gripper weights, and they kind of work like an anchor. And this is where it becomes important. This is what people don't realise. You have to treat it like an anchor. When we anchor a boat, we make sure we let out 3 times the length of line as we do the depth. And that's the reason for that, because we want an angle of the line. So if you can imagine this weight is hit the bottom, I need these grips to dig in the ground. Now if my line is up high, it will just drag like this. Whereas if my line is low, it will dig in. So what we do when we cast it out, so imagine we cast and our weight's hit, but we don't close our bow line, we let our line drift out. So we end up with our line, so this is my little grip lead, with our line going back in a big loop, call this a belly, and this goes back to our rod, like this. So the weight of the tide now pulls like an anchor would and drives our weight into the ground, allowing you to keep your terminal tackle uptide of the boat. Now the beauty of this is we can use all different kinds of rigs. So if I use a rig similar to what I showed you at the start there, with my hook line off into my weight, the problem I have with that is that if you can imagine this line's coming back this way, and now my hook will come back the same way and potentially tangle on it, and I don't want that. So what I do is I use what we call either a 2-up or a 2-hook flapper rig, which I'll quickly show you. I can show you on here actually. So you can imagine we've got a snood or a trace length with a hook, and I have 2 like this, and they'll sit like that. So I'll show you the rig. So the rig is here. It's now tangled with the other rig because I didn't put it down. So I've got my weight. I'm going to come up my line to a swivel which I hold in place with beads and cribs. And I personally, because I'm fishing off a rib, I'm using very short hook lengths. Some people use really long ones. One thing that's important is that your hook length doesn't reach your weight. So if you end up in a bit of slack tide, this can't tangle around the weight. And you also, if you tie it well, you don't want it to be able to touch your next hook because it will tangle around there. So when you tie it, if you want this longer, you have to make the distance between your hooks longer as well. It's important to remember that. Now the way this should sit, because the tides come out this way, is it should sit something like this, and it will sit away from a weight, sit away from a main line, and hopefully not tangle. Now there's lots of variations you can have within this, but I keep it simple, just one hook on the end of my trace line. We'll talk about some more complicated ones in later videos, but in essence this is uptide and downtide fishing. And the real beauty of it is that in low tide water, shallow water, we can get quite a lot of hooks. This won't work in deep water, because the deeper the water, imagine this is our shallow water, we're able to get that shallow angle of our line to make our hook, our grip lead to dig in and allow it to anchor. But if I double that depth, my line comes down at such a sharp angle that we're back to the problem of our weight sitting like this. So there's no point in going out in 30 metres of water, or even maybe even 10 or 15 metres of water, and trying to do this unless you're able to cast a really long way. Because if you can only cast, say, 20 metres off a boat, and you're in 20 metres of water, you're going down at a 45-degree angle. So we don't want the angle to be too deep. So if you're in really deep water, uptide may not work, because if you can imagine, this is if I make the seabed this depth quite shallow, and we let out our long belly line, so the line comes around, and it comes around at an angle like this, which is nice and shallow, and it allows the grip leads to anchor because they're going to pull this way. But the same, and this is imagine this is as far as I can cast. Now imagine if I cast into deeper water, and it comes down like this. The angle's like now, it's not a shallow angle, it's a deep angle. So the grip leads aren't going to grip in, and the tide's just going to wash them away. Now, if you can cast a really long way, if you can cast like right over here and then let your belly out, it's going to come around like this. You're going to get your nice shallow angle again, so it's fine. But most people can't cast more than 20-25 metres off of a boat because they haven't got big beach casting rods. They've got small, like 9 foot, 8 foot, 7 foot rods. So uptiding is only going to really work well in shallow water. So I'm going to do a bit of a recap here. I'll just rub this out a sec. Rub this all out. Here we go. So if we're fishing off the back of the boat, I believe, and this is a personal thing, different people do different things with weights. This is our weight, and this is going back to our rod. I believe that if you have your hook length after your weight, going this way down the tide, you've got less chance of this getting tangled up around your main line because it's being washed away. This is downtide fishing. Whereas if we have our hook length, so I get rid of this one, up from the weight, maybe like a flapper rig or something like that, it's going to wash this way, and it has the potential to wrap around this main line and tangle up, and we don't want that. So it would be my opinion that if you're downtide fishing, whatever rig you use, whether it's a pulley rig, it is irrelevant, but I believe you should have it after the weight, so you want your hook like this. Now if you're uptide fishing, or maybe even if you're not fully uptide or fully downtide, if you're sort of halfway fishing sideways off the boat, if you're able to do that, if your tide isn't pulling so hard, then I would argue that there's no harm in having your hook length after. You're not going to have the problem, but you do gain a benefit of being able to, if you can have hook lengths up your line, because then you can get them off the surface. When you fish after the weight, you're pretty much bound to be on the bottom. You're going to be fishing at the very, very bottom of the water column. Whereas if you can fish up your line, so maybe you've got a foot length between your weight and then your first hook length, and then a hook, and then maybe another foot or 2 foot, and then your next hook length, you can raise your hook a little bit off the waterbed, off the seabed, sorry. So if you fish both downtide and uptide, you're going to increase your chances of catching a fish, because you're going to be fishing in different locations with your bait presented in different ways. So I would argue that neither one is better. If you've got the opportunity to fish both methods, then fish both. One thing that's really important to remember when we're talking about fishing rigs, fishing methods, fishing baits, or anything really. It's all a matter of opinion. I'm talking about what works for me. I fish with my friend David, and he will fish on the same boat as me and fish slightly different rigs, slightly different methods. And I wouldn't say he ever does better or worse, or I do better or worse. It's on the day, sometimes he does better, sometimes I do better. And that goes the same for fishermen all over the world. I'm talking about what works for me, and sometimes you have to find what works for you in your location, in your area, with your level of skill and expertise, and on what is given on a day. So when I'm talking about the rigs and the methods, I am trying to give you a guide. This is how I do it, and perhaps it might be a good place to start, but you may find that once you get going you find a method that works better for yourself, and so bear that in mind. Is it a good scrap? It's kicking, I reckon it's that. Rod's right over, isn't it? Oh, that could be a ray if he's diving down again. He's not playing it. Sounds like a ray to me. Someone's give you a hand. I can pull it in with my hand. Live it. It's a ray. Is that a lug? Film me, mate. Hold up the camera.
Right, okay.
Nice one.
Well, that's the species we was expecting today.
Yeah, good one, mate.
Let in.
So if you ever catch a ray, you've got to be really careful what your fingers caught in their mouth, because they've got really grinding teeth. Well done, mate.
Trying to shit now works better as well.
Yeah, definitely, yeah. Yeah.